right, I'm going to introduce you and hope that people can hear you in the other room and that the people here are involved. Thank you. Welcome, Xalavier Nelson. First I want to welcome all of you here to the Indie Festival today, and I'm glad you were able to come. I'm glad you were able to come here for our keynote speaker, and I will let him tell you a little bit more about his credentials, but I do know that he's created some really cool games. I linked to that on the Indie Festival Discord, but if you missed that, then let me know and I'll be sure to put it up again. He has some great talks on YouTube, so go and look at those as well. And I'm going to turn the time over to Mr. Nelson to give you a little bit more information about himself and what he wants to do today.
Hey folks, my name is Xalavier Nelson Jr. I'm a writer and studio head. I've worked on over 70 games in the past 7 years in roles ranging from production to audio engineering at one point to writing, narrative design, narrative direction, and now just general design, direction, studio management stuff. I've had the fortune to collaborate with a lot of people in a lot of different team setups, and it's all happened in a fairly short amount of time. And that's given me a very unique perspective on the industry from a variety of levels, especially when it comes to the conditions under which we produce our games, and how when you change your processes, or when you don't change your processes, you change the types of projects that you can build. And the overall focus of the industry on a few different defined ideas of what a game looks like, what a game developer looks like, what a game production cycle looks like, means that there are experiences we aren't giving our players, and that there are avenues for sustainability that we aren't giving the people who make the projects that we love. So the goal of today's thing, from what I understand, is just to do a more open fireside chat where I speak as transparently as NDAs will allow me about basically any topic I have any expertise in, and especially, if you have any questions about whether or not you can make games, or whether or not something that makes sense to you in order to change your process is something that you can pursue to make games, I'm here to encourage you and say that is indeed the case.
Okay, so I do have a microphone here. If any of you have questions, feel free to come up and get the microphone so that you can be heard with your question.
It's kind of like a battle royale thing, and whoever has the microphone is the person who's winning. So scrap for it. This is officially approved and sanctioned.
Really don't want to use the mic, then yell out your question really loud.
Oh, we've got someone hopping, running.
Don't hurt yourself enough.
So with 70 games, or around 70 games in 7 years, that is like around 10 at least per year, which seems like an astronomical amount for one person to be. I don't like not doing all of it still. That is a lot of work in a short amount of time to do. What was that like to go from project to project to project? Because that's like a game every month, sort of thing.
Yeah, I would say there's a couple things that go into that. The first is that, especially when you work in the narrative portion of games, there is an element of privilege there. Your work can be fairly visible, right? People can be like, oh, this game has good writing. As a writer, you can, depending on the project, bounce between projects in a way that a programmer fitting that many games at that amount of time isn't necessarily feasible, but you work on a script for one thing, you go and edit a script for another thing, you do a consulting job here, you do a design thing here, you fix a fire here, and eventually, provided the work is consistent, depending on your goals, you can end up getting through quite a bit fairly quickly. But I'd say that at the end of the day, the biggest thing that sort of drove that amount of projects in that amount of time is the excuse me if you hear a construction in the background. I'd say the biggest thing is what my creative goals were. I tried to, at every step of my career, understand why I was doing what I was doing, what motivated me to build a given project or pursue a given course of creativity, what I actually enjoy about the process, not just getting my foot in the door. So I went from game journalism, actually. I've been in the industry total about 13 and a half years now. I went from game journalism into game writing, learned things that I loved there, learned overall general skills, found that there was pieces of the process that I enjoyed more and less. And then it was like narrative design, then figuring out that didn't really care how good the story was. I know I could tell a good story. The thing that is more important to me, though, is making sure that that story and that overall game is produced in a way that ensures everybody comes out intact on the other side, that the game hopefully comes in on time and under budget. So started doing a lot of stuff that was in production and biz dev, and agglomerating a set of skills to make it to where now I'm very blessed and fortunate to wake up every day. Every day looks very different, but I feel like I'm doing exactly what I was built to do. And working on all of those projects, I'd say the primary feeling, aside from tired, is a deep sense that I wish more people had this. Because one of the biggest problems that video games has, because you will typically have in a more typical setup, one person, if you just look at an individual, they work on one game for 2, 3, 5 years, 8 years. That means if you want to look at someone's creative progress, if you want to look at their overall library of work and their perspective, in the course of a career, even say they have a long career, they've got maybe 5, 10 games, maybe 15 games, and that's like it. Whereas if you look in film or almost any other industry, you're looking at people who have catalogs and libraries of like 20, 30, 50 plus things. The average career length for a game developer is 3 to 5 years still, total, before someone burns out. Everyone else who comes out the other side is kind of inherently a survivor. So, by definition. So, this affects the way we can make games, because people just quite simply don't see enough of the industry from enough different angles to learn lessons that keep them from crashing upon the shore, let alone figure out exactly what it is they want to do and how they want to do it, how their brains work to make their stuff. So yeah, I'd say the principal feeling coming out of all of this is I wish more people had the opportunity to work on more things in our production processes. We're more open in that regard, because creativity is such a journey of self-discovery that in video games, often that journey, you only get like 1 or 2 chances to make it. And that's a sad thing, both for our players and for the people who make our favorite games as well.
Any other questions, guys? Feel free, if you don't want to have to jump up here to get the mic, just ask your question loud enough. Turn on your teacher voice.
How did you handle burnout? Like handle not being burnt out?
If I'm being completely honest with myself, I think there's two types of burnout. There's hard burnout where you end up leaving the industry, or there needs to be an incredible recalibration of how you work, where you work, whether you work at all. I know people who've gone and become literal carpenters before they come back to the video games. That's a hard burnout. Hard burnout changes you. Soft burnout is more insidious to a certain degree, because there's not a hard edge where you woke up one day and your brain didn't work. It's that slow gathering fatigue, where, yeah, very quite simply, things that quote unquote should take you a certain amount of time, things that used to be easy for you, things that you loved doing, you feel your passion for those things drain away. You feel you get frustrated because as much as your skills are growing, your energy to apply those skills or to do like that extra push that's necessary in quite a few creative processes, you look for what's in the tank and it's not there, and that hurts your morale. It changes the way you see yourself over time into a being made of scars. If I'm being completely honest with myself, I don't think I've ever had a hard burnout phase. Thank God. And that's more of a thank God thing than a matter of being incredibly intentional about it. As much as I have tried to aim for overall sustainability in my career and my work habits. But if I'm being completely honest, I've had several soft burnout periods and they accumulate. There are ways you physically change going through burnout that are really interesting. I know developers who have gotten diabetes from really hard crunch burnout periods, how it changed their eating and just overall behavioral habits to the point that they came out of a dev cycle and suddenly, they have to change their entire life. For me, I crunched a lot when I was younger, getting to 70 projects. I didn't always have the knowledge of myself that I do. And I didn't always have the intention of survival and prioritization of survival that would result in some different, more efficient, more survivable work habits, frankly. And that resulted in people are like, oh, to be young. It's like, I spent all of that. It's a sliding scale where I spent all of that time instead of like in my 20s. I began my career in games when I was 12, pretending to be an adult so I could get a job. And I don't know what it says about video games, but that worked somehow. And I spent so much of that crunch juice early in my career that now I'm in my mid-20s and I can't control when my body shuts down. I will be watching a movie, I'll be in a public place, I'll be at a Bible study, and especially if I'm sitting down, I literally can't control the fatigue. My body just goes like, whoop. And that's a very scary lack of control and agency to feel. So to having established that context, the way that I would phrase my conversation around burnout and how to manage it is, first of all, Actually, I think the biggest thing here is there's a lot of stuff that goes into this conversation. It's something you could do an entire talk about. But the number one thing that I think has kept me here, aside from the grace of God, is that I never let the tank go empty. I spent a lot of time identifying what fills up my tank, what makes me feel creatively energized, what makes me feel rested, the conditions under which I feel rested. And I'm very precise about applying those specific things. So I know watching new movies, new television, reading comic books, reading regular books, all of those things fuel and energize me and give me sources of ideas and inspiration. That means that if I go without that for even a short period of time, especially if there's a heavy period of work, I'm going to start to run empty. I know that I feel more energized and rested and relaxed. As much as I adore being around friends and I feel to a degree extroverted, I have to, what's the right word for this? Oh yeah, I have to recover alone. Like I can watch a movie with friends, but I'm actually not decompressing unless I watch a movie or read a book or something by myself. I know that I don't want to work on one project for 5 years, and that's my only thing. And I bring it out into the world with a group of incredibly talented people. And if it doesn't sell really well in the first 2 weeks, there's a chance we might never make a game again. I know that drains me also, just like with general ADHD brain, to be in the room with a single object of focus and feel powerless in the face of it or something's going wrong. So building my studio structure around having multiple projects, all at different stages of development, going at the same time, so I can do the bounce that fits my brain. Making sure that even when I'm at an event like the Arkansas Indie Festival, I am very cognizant of the fact that my social battery, as much as that's being filled, my existential battery is being drained. I might need to go off by myself for a bit, or as soon as I get home, there's a few days I just don't speak to anybody. All of those have been really key to me, for me, managing burnout. And one of the common things that I hear from people who have experienced hard burnouts or are currently going through them is they hit a point where their tank runs empty, or they knew that their tank was running empty and they didn't know how to fill it. So the sooner you can build up those instincts in yourself, the more resources you'll have for dealing with the stuff that life throws at you. Because sometimes you can't help that a big thing has occurred, and the one option to take care of yourself and your team is to do a lot of work in a short amount of time. All you can do is try to mitigate it as best as possible with that overall priority of whatever keeps you going to your next game and your next game and the game after that, because both you and your players deserve it.
Does anyone else have any questions?
No. So we worked on lots of games. So my question is, what would you say is your favorite project, and what was your least favorite project?
Favorite project is weird because I end up falling in love with something about it, even the bad project setups. But I'd say my least favorite project, running through the Rolodex, is ones where I felt powerless, ones where I don't necessarily care too much about creative autonomy. I learned this about myself pretty early. I don't need to be the guy in charge. And even if it's my own project that I'm directing or whatever, having it be like my story as opposed to say like licensed IP or something isn't as important to me. What I care a lot about is control and management of process and of outcomes, the goals set for whether or not a project was successful or not. And any project I've joined where I did not have the ability to significantly move forward project goals, for example, or that the overall way in which the game was produced was one where I couldn't protect the people around me from crunch cycles or burnout, or from clearly self-destructive processes or dynamics. Whenever I've stepped into those situations, which, especially when you're doing contract work in a bunch of different situations, is almost inevitable. That was really tough. My favorite projects are marked by being the opposite, marked by really active collaboration cycles where we discover new and interesting ways to make games. I'd say one of my favorite of that was an airport for aliens currently run by dogs. That was like the first big project I directed, and it has a special place in my heart because at the time, I would say I was in a soft burnout period. I was in a mental space where I said, it doesn't matter if I get destroyed in the process, as long as the game is good, as long as the people around me are okay, and as long as the game is good, then that means that I was good, even if I burn upon the pyre of its creation. And that's extraordinarily unhealthy, obviously, for a number of reasons. And at that time, the NYU Game Center reached out to me and said that every year we do this thing called No Quarter, where we reach out to 4 of the most notable independent developers in games, and we give them a small amount of money, and you come out to New York and show it in October. You make whatever you want, just make sure that you can show it in October. And this is like in the summer that they asked this. And I was like, yeah, that sounds really cool. This is the showcase that spawned Nidhogg. I'm going to do that, even in my soft burnout state. I start building this game around the existential dread of travel, around wanting to communicate to the people you love that you love them, despite the fact that you aren't physically in the same space. It was called An Airport for Aliens. You're surrounded by a language that you don't know. You have to translate it and learn the dynamics of it in the world in order to continue to take flights. On those flights, you would have small narrative segments talking to the fellow passenger, and then you would be in another airport doing it all over again, trapped in this cycle. As a joke to myself, early in the development of this thing, as I'm also learning Unity alongside like the most prominent collaborator on that project, my co-designer and the programmer, Tom Benita. He's teaching me Unity at the same time. I stick in as a joke to myself as sort of the character who's at the reception desk for these airports, a black and white photo of a Jack Russell Terrier. And I had gotten the scale off because I'm early to working in Unity. So I press play for the first time as we're getting the dialogue system working. And there's an 8-foot tall Jack Russell Terrier towering over my character, looking down saying, "Hey, want a ticket to Uranus?" And I was like, oh, this is the game. This is the game. So it became An Airport for Aliens, currently run by dogs. A game, an open world comedy adventure game about traveling a universe of airports run by stock photo dogs, solving their problems and finding time in between for the people that you love. And this idea of a universe that used to be run by humans, done by aliens, now it's by dogs. It's dogs, because the cats didn't want to do it. They'll let the dogs do the hard work. And The dogs are the people who was around. I was forced to, at every layer of the experience, ask, how would dogs run this world? Dogs are the projection of enthusiastic hope into a complicated world. Dogs believe that you are valuable just because you're here. And that perspective applied to the fairly inhuman process of like airport security or transit in general, transit logistics. I had to do a lot of personal growth. I had to, as part of the process of making that game, I'd be looking at like, hey, do we have a currency system? And I'd have to ask the question, would a dog care if you didn't have enough money to afford an airplane ticket? No, they just give you another ticket. If they'd give you another ticket if you missed your flight. If you asked them, they would give you 50 tickets. So like the signature interaction of our game became when you walk up to the reception desk, you can ask for a ticket to your chosen location, or you can ask for 50 tickets. And the dog says, so you like to live dangerously, and then drops 50 tickets on you. And they're all physics enabled objects, and they stack on each other. You can just keep asking for 50 tickets and they'll just pile up around you because the dogs don't care. They just want you to be happy. And understanding that I could have in that game a process built around joy and human priority, and then that could also apply to my own personal creative process and life and the environment that I created in my studio, because this was happening as my studio was starting. Thank God that in my previous perspective, I wasn't really managing people, at least to the degree that I do now. That blew my brain open, and so that's the origin and genesis point for a lot of what Strange Scaffold does today, and a lot of who I am now. Thank that Jack Russell Terrier. It was thin but powerful.
Any other questions?
I know you spoke pretty quickly about what refills you're taking the passion, so you have that. It was very clear it's literature based, like movies and shows and reading. So obviously you still have that passion for writing. But I noticed, whether by design or simply by mistake, you didn't mention games as a way to refill that work in the industry. Have you felt that hobby that maybe you once had at one point has like dropped kind of how it functions in your life, how it can refill that battery? Because that's the source of burnout.
I would say the type of games that I've played has changed. I used to play narrative games a lot, like things like Firewatch and Edith Finch, and all sorts of like interactive fiction adventures, and that was fun to me. Now, having done as much writing as I've done, so many games, even if they're short, it's like they're like, oh yeah, it's short, it takes 10 hours. 10 hours is a lot. That's an entire show. As a storytelling medium, games, especially at the larger or seemingly more mainstream end, trend towards the more time consuming. So it can be tough to fit that in, even just in terms of pure hours spent. But that's resulted in, me not playing as many narrative games or not enjoying them as much. I enjoy narrative told in different ways in games. I don't typically play game experiences where the only point or method of interaction is that it's telling me a story. The second major thing that I'd flag is that, even with that in mind though, the reason I focus on film and TV and comics and these other storytelling mediums is because I so strongly prioritize cross-disciplinary inspirations. I have never been to a mosh pit before, and this year, as the world started to open up again, I started going to mosh pits and engaging with like local music culture in El Paso, Texas, and I considered that not just a personal growth experience, but also a piece of filling the tank, inspiring my creative drive, engaging with a new mindset, and a potential source for future inspiration professionally. I take that so seriously that I don't necessarily mention games as filling the tank, even though they super do. I know people in the industry who do not play games anymore, or very rarely do it. I respect that. I understand that. I think to a degree it is necessary, even just for, to a degree, professional responsibility to keep apprised of events and how things are and how people play them and why people play and enjoy those things. But if you, for the most part, don't play games, you still have a place in games. If you don't play any place in all, if you don't play any games at all, you still have a place in games. But I play games really regularly, and I bounce between different genres and core appeals all the time in order to grow that sensibility. So yeah, it's more of an omission because we don't, as an industry, talk enough about how much it's important to draw from sources other than games, even though I'm at the end of almost every workday where I can fit it in. And also just every day in general, I take my tablet, I set it up like on prop it up on a pillow at the edge of my bed. I turn on my console and I play something, anything. I jump into Power Wash Simulator or Max Payne, or what's one I'm enjoying a lot right now? It's on the tip of my tongue. I really enjoyed Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 8, but I'll just turn on something and my brain gets to watch a thing that satisfies it, and I'm doing something with my hands, and I'm getting really invested into both experiences to make sure that tomorrow the solutions I come up with are potentially quite different than the ones I come up with today, because that makes me a broader creative voice, and it means that there's more spaces I have to understand where other people are coming from when they say Cargo Commander, which is a more obscure indie game from the early 2010s. I can be like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And in that moment, a connection is forged. Unshakable bonds are created. And it gives you a really nice shorthand for speaking to people from other mediums, saying, I want something that feels a bit like a John Carpenter movie, or name or spit out any list of references until you reach something that falls into their line of experience, and you can draw that chain of logic to what you're specifically going for. That's incredibly useful for direction, having a wide range of references and touch points for the people who aren't you to understand what you're communicating about that you love in a thing as well.
Do you think there's value in making games that very likely are never going to be successful, just for the joy of making them?
I think there's definite value there. And that if someone is going to make games like that, please, for the love of God, don't make it your single-minded pursuit for 8 years of your life, or accept that as the creative process of that thing, right? Because what happens usually is you'll have a team, an indie team, that pitches a game around, and you win the lottery, you manage to get funding. They work on that thing for 2, 3, 5, 8 years. Then they release it into the world. Sometimes knowing ahead of time, this is not, barring a major outlier success, it's not going to make that money back. But there's no additional secret hidden money It's just that they spent the budget or maybe more than the budget, and now the game has come out and they might not receive royalties because there might be a recoup from their publisher that needs to get paid back first. And it is a heavy, heavy burden. I come from a very lower middle class background, so maybe I think of money a bit differently. But looking at literally any creative idea I have and saying, you have a $300,000 obligation attached minimum, is a really heavy thing to put on a project, let alone a group of people. Just existentially, the burden that if you don't make $500,000, it wasn't worth making you, means that there's so many things that don't get made, or that there's things that get made that are beautiful, that execute their creative idea in a way that it continues to inspire the industry, but that the people who looked upon it, who created it, can't look upon it with positivity because, well, it didn't ever make its money back. That is the game that they made. That meant that they immediately had to get a job in retail afterwards to cross the barrier between when they could, apply for a job in games again and attain one. So with all of that in mind, it's deeply valuable and necessary to make games, whether you think they'll be commercially successful or not, that have a different process attached, that have a different existential weight attached, just for the joy of it. If you just want to make a game about a little ghost inside of a ghost as seen through like throwing a sheet over something, and it's just like a bobbing around little sheet, and it goes around tipping things over, and no one plays that except for you. The commercial conditions and existential weight we place on projects inherently casts project like that in a light where that time is seen almost as a waste. I know people who have made birthday games or proposal games or anniversary games for partners and friends and people that they love. There's almost always a question of, why don't you release that publicly attached to that, even if it's a deeply personal thing? Because if you're only going to release like 5 games in your career, any other thing you can attach to that, if you manage to make that in your off time, like, you should put that out there somewhere, because you only get like 5 games. That is a sad thing. And it's worth questioning. It is because, quite frankly, it's BS. Make games just for you. Make games for a tiny audience. Make games that are never intended to be commercially successful. Games that don't even have to say anything at all. It's just, you wanted to make this thing that looks exactly like another thing, but worse, because that made you feel good. Like that's totally fine. Just the only caveat I would add to that equation is, make sure you do it in a context that does not layer onto it a burden that doesn't fit its goals. Making that game for you that no one else ever has to play. Don't take out a mortgage to pay for it, and you'll be fine, and the game will be better for it.
How much from the teams you worked on, the team's resources and time spent on, or your money spent on marketing for the success of any of these games?
If I'm understanding you correctly, because the further out the microphone is, the harder it is to hear it. Is the question, how much of a game's budget is spent on marketing?
Yeah, essentially.
It's different for every single project. I have seen projects where nearly the budget of the game or more is spent on marketing, and that's worked. I've seen games where that was the case and it did not work. I've seen games where they spent nothing on marketing and they went viral. I've seen games that spent a small amount on marketing and they got back, you know, small, medium, large returns. Marketing is a really interesting beast because all you can guarantee is the execution, the words that you say, the trailers that you produce. You can point at that thing and say, this is what we said, this is how we made it, this is what it communicates. But you can't guarantee who will see it or necessarily how it will impact them. You can be pretty sure how it's going to go, but in terms of the impact on an end user towards a member of your audience, but you can't guarantee this trailer is so good it's going to get 100,000 views. It's not the way the world works. So as the most direct answer to your question, any and every number under the sun has been proposed and used for the marketing of a game. The question of whether or not it's effective is a matter of execution, but it's also a matter of time and chance, which makes marketing a bit of an existential horror because you can't guarantee it. It is a total it's a total gray zone. You could throw like $10 million in marketing and be like, it helped. And whenever you have something like that where its impact is hard to track, it's also one of the easiest things to misattribute for success or lack thereof. People are like, the marketing was bad, that's why the game failed. Not necessarily. Or the marketing was good, that's why the game succeeded. Or like, ooh, this marketing strategy is what made that game a success. It's like, no, the game was a success. This is the marketing strategy used. Those two things aren't exactly aligned. So being deeply aware that all marketing is Calvin ball, which is why it's important to have more ways to talk about the game, more ways to talk about the marketing of the game, giving myself as many opportunities as possible, not just to talk about the game, but like the thing that we made to market the game, and then how we did the thing to market the game, and then why we did the how of the thing to market the game, as well as just more games, are all things I use to keep myself grounded as we play the biggest game of money chess on an invisible board with pieces shaped like candles, and you don't know which one will burn you. That's game marketing, baby.
So I have a question. While we're on the subject of marketing, what method of marketing have you found to be the most effective overall?
It's going to be different for every person and for every project, and I would argue it needs to be. This is where a lot of marketing in games goes wrong, when you apply a surefire strategy or whatever is the signature of a given PR agency, and say that worked really well for like Gotham Knights. I'm gonna do that exact same thing for my game. I'm gonna have a per character overview trailer, and then a launch overview trailer, and then way before that, like a systems overview trailer. That's not the case. Every game, its scale is going to define how you market it. Its intended audience is going to define how you market it. Outside of even unique game strategies, outside of even unique, marketing strategies and ideas, the fact that not every game deserves a giant marketing spend. Not every game benefits from a huge marketing spend, or conversely, not every game benefits from like a lean, minimal, unique punching above your weight strategy. Sometimes you just need pure money spent on Facebook ads and Reddit ads. Approaching every project in a highly individualistic, holistic way in terms of marketing is what I have seen to be the most effective overall, as well as marketing that honestly aligns with the sensibilities of the creators behind it. So to use my own studio as an example, I know that I find it both draining and difficult to produce highly polished marketing assets all the time. Doing like the daily gifts or like the YouTube videos that are like perfectly cut and highly edited and have a bunch of voiceover. That isn't how my brain works. That drains the tank more. Speaking of, sustainability, there's certain tasks that, for you, drain your tank way more. It's like, I find it easy to wash clothes and to dry the clothes, but putting them up, hanging them on a hanger and putting them up for some reason is way harder for me. And I hate it. So I've got a clothes pile on my couch. Being the same thing applies to games marketing, where it's like, hey, I know for me, I have it is really hard for me to capture gifts, both because of my discipline, the discipline I'm in as a games writer and how I interact with the engine and this type of stuff that I capture, but also just the way that I communicate about my games. What I am good at, though, is being a chaos gremlin. I'm really good at identifying a variety of core appeals and ways to talk about and around our project, and then finding deeply chaotic ways of talking about both the production of the game as well as the game itself. One of the signature lines that I'm using for a game that we're revealing in the near future and releasing before the end of the year is, I'm not teaching children how to gamble. This game is not teaching children how to gamble, which is true. I'm not teaching children how to gamble, but phrasing it in that specific way is not something a human being not teaching children how to gamble does. And that's my brand. That's me. I can have a brand that is not existentially mind-shattering for me to sustain because my brand is working along with my patterns as a human being. I don't do stuff on Instagram because Instagram doesn't work with my brain. A chaotic TikTok where I'm doing like different angles and whatever else, I can do that. There's certain types of TikToks I can't do. I do the ones that I can, and I just lean into those angles really hard. And I've got really great people around me, including like our community manager, Leanne Bradbury, and the guy who was our marketing guy for a really long time, Hunter Bond. Their sensibilities as well creep into how the studio markets itself and how our work is discussed, because they are also given an environment to operate from their creative sensibilities. And it would be a shame, given their skills, to not allow them to fully utilize them. So what's most effective? Turns out working within your brains and your capabilities and your limits, and then just doing the best you can with that. Also, frankly, metric bleep tons of money, so much money. If you do have enough money, there is a degree to which you can just flood the world. And if anyone wants to do that for a Strange Scaffold game, let me know. Call me. I don't know if I'd enjoy that. Interesting thought.
Could you imagine yourself doing what you're doing, working remotely and traveling?
Did I imagine it? Is the question?
Could you imagine yourself doing what you're doing, working remotely and traveling? Or is that what you are doing?
That is what I do. I have never been in a major game dev hub. Starting at the age of 12, like at the time, I believe we were in Washington State? I was in a military. I was a military brat, so significant portion of my time as a person in games was then in like Korea and then in Italy. And when I was in Italy, I then approached / reached adulthood. So I bounced to places around Italy and did work there. That was also when my game dev career, as opposed to my journalism career, started to kick off. Then from there, we moved to El Paso, Texas, which is 10 hours from Austin and Dallas and the game dev hubs there. So like, there's always been a sense, when we were in Washington State, we were not in, by the way, we weren't in like Seattle or anything else, again, that was anywhere near a game development center. We were in a small town ruled by a cult, and no one told us it was ruled by a cult before we moved there. I ended up doing, my very first job was doing landscaping for that cult and learning about that cult in the process of landscaping for them and finding bunker entrances and stuff on their properties. I was 15. That was weird. Anyway, my opening advice for anyone looking to get into game dev is that you can't do it unless you do a little bit of work for a cult first. Do it in landscaping, do it in marketing. Just figure out a way to work for a cult and then go from there. The second one would be, yeah, if you aren't in a major game dev hub, that's been my literal position. I will say travel, in-person connections, once I have the ability to do that, has been vital to supporting remote work in that way. Even, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, there's way more remote opportunities. But even pre-pandemic, going to GDC, 3-minute conversations would end up being the things that kept my career going, that would not immediately pay off, but like, a couple of years later would end up saving my studio. I would say I've currently found an effective division, and this isn't gonna be the case for everyone, but like I work remote, my entire team is remote, and then I travel for both networking, human connection, and speaking to platforms and publishers. That in-person connection tends to be really important as well. So yeah, El Paso, Texas has a pretty low cost of living. It's a really kind area. It's a border town, so it has a really unique cultural vibe. And I can reach out my hand and I'll be in Juarez and several places that are like even like a 10-15-minute drive from me. Yeah, there's an airport like 20 minutes down the road, and I can go anywhere from there. So I think especially in today's post-pandemic world, it is deeply feasible to not be in a game dev hub or a traditional game dev hub and to still have an impact on the industry and to find the collaborators who you could be working with for the next 10, 15, 20 years.
To go along with that, how have you found funding to keep your studio going? Because I know a lot of the people here have made small games or continuing to make small games, and they're doing them as passion projects, all with the idea that obviously eventually they want to sell it enough to be able to sustain a studio and not keep working on it for 2 or 3 hours after their full-time job every day. So how did you evolve your studio to a point, not just, so how did you get the funding to be able to make games in your own studio?
It might surprise you, but making an open world comedy adventure game about stock photo dogs is a really weird pitch to bring to people who have millions of dollars. That's not necessarily a recipe for success. There were people who ended up wanting to give us funding, but but there's always strings and processes attached to that funding. And early in my career, the very, very first game that I made, it was called All Hail the Spider God. It was a game that I made as I was about to leave the industry. It was a Twine game. Twine is what I had access to. Twine is what I could use. Twine was free. I made games from the resources and capacity and perspective I had, which gave me the resources, capacity, and perspective to make my next game and my next game and my next game, both on my own terms as well as on like freelance and contracting bases. So with that perspective in mind, I kind of gained a perspective, which again, not for everybody, none of this advice is universally applicable. Just take from it whatever resonates for you. There's something deeply powerful to you being able to personally define whether or not a game is worth making. Not whether or not it gets funding from a publisher, not whether or not it's in Game Pass. The thing that validates the game is the fact that you are making it is a powerful tool to have in even your creative toolbox. So Strange Scaffold was built as an entity. Strange Scaffold is my studio, to always operate under my own funding, if at all necessary, and anything else it gets is nice. So my very first like larger game, it was a co-development with Natalie Clayton, who was a journalist for quite some time. Well, originally a game dev student, then a journalist, then has now gone back into game dev. Good for Natalie. It was a game called Can Androids Pray, and we basically made it with free assets and some 3D models that Natalie, who was into mechs, had laying around, as well as we split the cost of a composer together. And then that was a thing that we could sell, and that gave us a little bit of money. And alongside our outside work, that gave us a basis for doing other stuff, and then doing other stuff. Long story short, there's a lot of avenues for funding: publishing, platforms, subscription deals, meeting people in person is critical, especially to a lot of these more corporate environments. There's just something that you get from being in the room with people that unfortunately is not replaced. Again, I've had 5-minute conversations that have ended up resulting in 5-figure, 6-figure deals that have either saved the studio or put the studio in a position to where it could substantially, increase its creative ambitions, or maintain its creative ambitions for a longer period of time, without compromise or without harming the people inside of the structure. So all those options are on the table, and y'all can DM me via Twitter or TikTok or Instagram, or just send me an email if you have any more specific questions, and I'm legitimately always happy to chat about this in more specificity according to your situation and help. But I'd say the biggest thing is it's also incredibly valid, and I would say even necessary, to make games under your own power, within your own resources. Even if that game only brings in like $5 a month, that's pizza money. And if you've got enough little avenues of pizza money coming in, suddenly that becomes the budget for a small game. And then that becomes another source of pizza money, and that becomes the potentially the source of budget for a much larger thing. It is exhausting to work a full-time job, and then in your 2 to 3 extra hours, make a game that should take, a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and it takes a year instead. but it is uniquely, there's something really nice about that in comparison to the idea of a lot of, and the position a lot of my peers are in, where they have a publisher, they have funding, but if they fail this next milestone, games, for those who aren't familiar, are broken typically into funding milestones when they're published. So you have whatever the milestone is, like reach art complete, or first 10 levels, gray box, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You negotiate for months sometimes these milestones. A lot of my peers in our position where if they fail a milestone and have to retry it because of how milestones work, that means that they don't get rent that month. It was really nice to know that your bills are paid with a bog standard office job, retail job, food service job, and know that you're going to eat tomorrow and pay rent. And from that basis, you can make anything, especially if you calibrate the size and intention of the thing within the limits and inherent resources in terms of both time and money that you have. You can reach the entire world on Steam for $100. That's how much it costs to get onto Steam. It's very unlikely you'll sell as many copies as GTA 5, but you can bring your project to the entire world for as little as $100. So with that in mind, there's very few people asking the question of what it looks like to make the $100 game, the $1,000 game, the $5,000 game. And coming from the perspective of an enlisted military brat who didn't have resources or really a safety net that I could guarantee, seeing that that was possible in games is why I'm here. Games, I think, is the one space where I could exist right now, especially without with existing connections or institutional resources, especially in any capacity for autonomy, regardless of what my skills might be, or how someone would evaluate whether or not I had skills. In games, I get to make those decisions for myself. And you get to do the same. I don't know how long that's going to be the case either, where we have this surprising lack of gatekeepers and this immense amount of money flowing through the industry, even just in terms of players looking for something new, something like what they played before, but just like not that thing because they've already played it 5 times. The door is open. It is entirely within your power to walk through it, and there is a entire community of people ready, willing, and delighted to see you take those steps.
You mentioned that the importance of seeing and talking to people in person, which I absolutely agree with. So you mentioned GDC as one specific place that you connect with people. Do you have a couple of other suggestions on ways to find that community, ways to connect with other people, to start building the kind of world that you're talking about?
So my cheat sheet, not having money and still to a degree not having money, is there's a couple of things. First, establish the relationship digitally and then reinforce in person, right? So establishing relationships cold is, depending on the type of person you are, it can be really, really hard. If you've already built up relationships with people ahead of time, though, or like you've already been communicating via email, and then you make the plan to meet at GDC, then you know, especially for an expensive trip like GDC, that costs people like $5 grand, 10 grand for that week just to be there in San Francisco. Even if you don't attend the conference, if you pay for a conference pass, especially, that's another, 5-10 grand packed on top. Also, a lot of devs are just in the area for GDC. Most of them, including myself, hang out at Yerba Buena Gardens for a significant part of the event. You can also not just pay for a ticket. I shouldn't say that because I'm on like the Indie Summit board, but like you can just go to San Francisco during GDC. That's still $10,000 though. Holy cow. How do you make that worthwhile? You can at least guarantee ahead of time that there will be people who wave at you and wave you over into a group when you come there, because they know you pre-existing. So establishing digital connections and then reinforcing them physically, and then continuing to maintain them afterwards digitally is a really powerful tool. The second thing I'd recommend is, for me at least, I found it very powerful to, especially early in my career, not go to an event where I wasn't speaking or explicitly doing something, because it's again a matter of introduction. If I'm going to a place where no one knows me, but I'm going to speak at some point during the day, then for the worst impulses of humankind, where someone's like looking at you as far as status, are you worth talking to? You're speaking at the event that they probably paid to go to, or that they think is worthwhile to go to as like a vendor or a funding source or whatever this case may be. So you get to say, yeah, I'm speaking at 3 p.m. or I'm talking on Tuesday. It gives you a way to introduce yourself. It gives you an avenue through which people already know your name or might have looked you up before they've seen you. That's really powerful, especially when you are earlier in your career. The second nice thing about going to events that you are doing something at is, for lack of a better term, it gives you something to say to start the conversation. Even if it's just at a PAX and you're helping your favorite indie with their booth, say Finji. Finji, I believe, has booth volunteers. They publish things like Tunic and I Was a Teenage Exocolonist. All great games in their portfolio, by the way. You might have met someone that day because they came by the Finji booth. When people say like, well, who are you? What do you do? You're like, oh, I make games. And I was helping at the Finji booth earlier. It gives you something you can attach your name to. And it's not, I'm just using Finji booth as a stand-in. It could be anything. It could be like the Toje Games booth, whatever the case may be. It gives you a way to connect to a name that people recognize, even if they don't recognize you, having seen you earlier in the day. You can be like, they're like, oh yeah, cool, you helped them with that. And it becomes a conversation, rather than a conversation starter, it becomes something that is a conversation enabler. It keeps the conversation going. And I found, especially when you're figuring out what of a very limited pool you're going to spend your money on, making cool things, applying to bring your games to those events, or to give talks about your games or your process at events. That gives you a really easy answer for what events do I go to? The ones that give me a platform, even just a tiny one, to begin to extend my network of relationships and friends and allies, collaborators, co-conspirators.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, I do. I don't know, can you hear me, Ms. Lawther?
Yes, I can hear you, Lynn.
Okay, cool. All right, I'm gonna turn my camera on real quick then.
Hey.
Hey, yeah, so my question is, we talked a lot about like, keeping yourself motivated, right? But how do you keep your team motivated? Because I know about all those factors of like, will we be successful? Are we enjoying what we're making? It can be a lot. So how do you make sure your team's morale is good?
I'd say one of the things I've personally found, one of the things I found personally deeply important for maintaining team morale is figuring out what motivates them in the first place, and trying to continue your discussion, angle your discussion around this, around their individual perspectives, because you'd be surprised how many people you could even be paying them great money. That isn't what motivates them though. So like, it doesn't change the conversation. You'd be surprised how many people they could be working on like a big brand and they don't care about that big brand or necessarily brand name recognition. So the fact that it's attached to like a big publisher they've heard of or attached to like a big IP doesn't drive them. Human beings have different human factors that give them inspiration, give them the ability to do the incredible human things that we do. So if you're looking for how to maintain team morale, I'd say the first point is know your team. What do they actually care about? And this sometimes might not be the thing that they say they care about. They're like, man, I just want money. It's like, no, you don't though. You want to work a certain number of hours a week, or it's really important to you to make things in this way, or to only work on these parts of a project. If you know a person, or and build up a vocabulary to ask people what they care about, and get those answers, then it gives you a basis not just to maintain their motivation and their morale on an individual basis, because we are individuals making these games. It also helps you to identify someone who isn't a great fit. If someone is like, man, I like to go fast, I like to go hard, I like to do game jams, and you're like, this is supposed to be a relaxed dev cycle, while you're hitting the paint really hard, the entire team has to catch up to you, and potentially that builds up resentment because they're going really hard and no one else is. That's a mismatch. So build up that language, figure out what's motivating people, how and why they create, and you're going to be in a much better position to keep them going long term.
Awesome, thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
What are some key management structures that you implement into your studio?
Some key what?
Management structures that you implement into your studio.
I am not formally trained in management structures. The one thing I did get more so from my upbringing is that my dad was in the military, and I didn't know that it was a formal concept at the time, but he told me about this concept. But the concept is apparently formally called like servant leadership, or service-based leadership. But essentially, he taught me that management was a position of service rather than one of power. Your job is to be an example. Your job is to take a hit so that the rest of your team doesn't. For all of the privilege of responsibility, the burden that comes with it, that should be embraced or otherwise stepped back from, if you've identified that you don't want to be a leader, is one of human responsibility and of empowerment and enabling. Your job isn't to command people to do what to do, to do a thing. It is to, in many cases, as opposed to an act of command, it is one of creating expectations and guidelines and providing clear context for people to do that work, and then enabling them and empowering them to do their best work to reach those objectives in a healthy, human, and sustainable way. That doesn't necessarily guarantee that they will do the best with that opportunity, but if you are acting in good faith and acting in this perspective and position of service, I have seen that be transformative, even in teams that previously had really harmful management structures. I can't speak too much to management structures. There's a lot of ways to manage a team. I think, again, a lot of ways that team should be managed should be based off of the team and off of the project on an individual basis. But even more so than that, I think that individual perspectives of management are where I operate from. And so, yeah, my objective is to pay people fairly, to do the most interesting, flexible work that they can at any given time, in enabling and empowering environments to make something singular and weird. So yes, it's mine, and the studio has a legitimate kind of auteur sensibility, but the thing that keeps that from being insufferable, I think, is in large part due to the fact that my inherent management perspective and the way that I bring people into projects is one that allows people, that actively encourages and celebrates, okay, yes, this is my vision, but now that I've established this basis of what we're trying to go for, how do your ideas come into play? How does your perspective broaden idea of what we've even thought of this project as being? People can see themselves in this, and I talk actively about how folks like Sam Chiat and Julia Minamata and Tom Bonita and the long list now of people I've worked with for my studio have been fundamental to creating those games, not just in terms of enabling it, but in terms of you can see them in the project too. That isn't something that comes to bear in an auteur environment if you don't see management and the privilege of being able to collaborate with people as an act of service. And I would say, regardless of your wider management structure or perspective or the specific hierarchy in mind, that kind of always, I have never seen that go wrong. Taking this attitude of, I've never seen it go wrong, taking this attitude of empowerment and using it to decisively, yes, but also empathetically encourage the people around you to do their best work.
Thank you so much for speaking with us today. I feel enriched. I feel like this was a great experience, and we have taken up a little more of your time than we meant to do, but we really appreciate it. It was great. Thank you so much. So I'll leave it. One more, any really quick things anyone needed to say?
Rapid fire.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
work for a cult. The Arkansas Indie Festival wants you to work for a cult. It's officially sanctioned. You heard it here first.
And we hope you have a great day. Thanks.
I hope you all have a great day. Thank you so much for having me, and take care.